What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through some must-add waiver wire targets heading into week 1 of the NFL season. The goal of this video is to pretty much beat everyone to the punch when it comes to the week 2 targets. If you can kind of figure out what players are going to emerge in week 1, you're going to be able to save your fab, maybe save your priority waiver spot. And I just think it can, set you off on the right foot, get you a step ahead of your league mates heading into week 1 of the fantasy football season. So these are going to be players that are rostered in 30% or fewer leagues using the ESPN waiver wire. And let's just dive right into it here. My first target is going to be at the running back position, and it is going to be Dylan Sampson. He's currently rostered in only 21.7% of leagues. And when you look at this Browns running back room, Quinshon Judkins, who a few months ago was the favorite to be the running back 1, he is still unsigned. He is not going to be active week 1. He is not going to be playing. And so we're going to be looking at some sort of split between Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford. And in the last preseason game, we saw both of these running backs play, but Dylan Sampson actually was out there with the ones. He was the first running back to touch the field. And so I think there's a real chance that in week 1, he is the Browns' number 1 option at the running back position. And to just kind of be able to jump the gun, pick up a number 1 running back on an NFL team. I know it's not a super, sexy offensive situation, but if Dylan Sampson is out there week 1 and he leads the Browns in touches, he is going to be one of, if not the number 1 ad for the waiver wire heading into week 2. So I think being able to just get out ahead of this is very smart when it comes to Dylan Sampson, because the role is right there. He's a young player. We don't know how this Quinshon Judkins thing is going to pan out. Dylan Sampson might just come out week 1, look solid, and maintain that role throughout the rest of the season. Then the next player I want to talk about here, another running back, it is going to be Ollie Gordon. He is rostered in 24.1% of leagues. And I just think right out of the gate here, he is looking like the clear running back 2 for the Dolphins with Jalen Wright, out early on in the season. But even if Wright didn't get hurt, Ollie Gordon had come in and just straight up outplayed him in the preseason, looked really solid, averaged 4.8 yards per carry to Jalen Wright's 1.5. We also have De'Von Achane dealing with a calf injury. It does look like he's going to be good to go week 1, but we don't know if his workload's going to be a little bit smaller. Could he re-aggravate it? All of a sudden, Ollie Gordon is stepping into a really solid role in this offense. And then also, you just look at his frame. He's 6'1", 225 pounds. He could definitely end up stepping in as the goal line back. Now, what's kind of interesting is that even though he does have that big size, in college, he wasn't this, big, bruising running back. He was kind of someone who preferred to run outside, very involved as a pass catcher. He didn't play like you'd expect just looking at him given his frame. He's not a Derrick Henry type runner, but I do think he looked a lot better with contact in the preseason. He at least has the frame where it might give the coaches confidence. Even if he's not the most physical runner at 6'1", 225, you'd still think he'd probably be better near the goal line than a guy like De'Von Achane, who's maybe 200 pounds. So maybe he's a little bit more of a handcuff, but just with the injuries around him at the running back position, the RB2 role in this Dolphins offense could still be interesting. Just 2 years ago, we saw De'Von Achane and Raheem Mostert both be top 5 running backs in points per game. So Ollie Gordon should be rostered in, more than a quarter of leagues, which is where he's at right now. Then we're going to talk about our first wide receiver here, and that is Luther Burden. Now, kind of, different from these other guys, I'm not really expecting Luther Burden to come out week 1, ball out, and be a priority target. His roster percentage might actually go down after week 1, because I don't think he's going to be someone who's getting starting routes in week 1, making a huge impact. I think he is firmly out of 3 wide receiver sets at this point, but this is just a high upside stash. I just think he's too talented of a player on an offense that I think has a very, very high ceiling to just be sitting around on waivers. At this point, it looks like Olamide Zaccheaus is kind of taking that wide receiver 3 role. Obviously, you have Rome Odunze, DJ Moore as the top 2 wide receivers. But Olamide Zaccheaus is just not scaring me. I do think it's a valuable role. In the preseason, Zaccheaus earned the second most targets with the ones with Caleb Williams at the quarterback position. You look at Luther Burden, he's an electric player with the ball in his hands. I think if he can kind of work his way into the slot, into Ben Johnson offense, that is just a really, really fun role for him. And one of the big hurdles he had to clear was being a willing blocker. We know that Ben Johnson pretty much requires his pass catchers to block, the no block, no rock. Luther Burden did not block in college. He was a very willing blocker in the preseason. He's the wide receiver that's been handpicked by this new coaching staff Luther Burden in competitive leagues should not be sitting out on the waiver wire. Even if he's like the 5th, 6th, 7th guy on your bench, he should be rostered. It's early on in the season. You don't have bye weeks. You're not going to have a ton of injuries. Whatever like random veteran you have on the end of your bench, they're not going to be cracking your lineup. So you might as well take an upside swing on a guy like Luther Burden, because once he does break into those 3 wide receiver sets, like he is going to be scooped up instantly. You want it to be a situation where your league mates were all looking for him. He had a decent like breakout performance and he is already on your roster. Then I want to talk about 2 running backs from the same backfield, the Houston Texans. Now this Joe Mixon thing is really all up in the air at this point. We know he's going to miss at least the first 4 weeks. It's possible he doesn't play at all this season. It's possible he comes back, but just isn't close to the same guy and like isn't going to be like their starting workhorse running back. And as of right now, there's not like a clear next option. Like maybe you're looking at Nick Chubb and you think he's going to step in, be the clear-cut running back 1. I'm just not super confident in that at this stage in his career. You know, the injury he had in 2023 didn't look great last year. I do think Chubb's going to be involved like early on in the season. I do think like week 1, we're probably going to see a pretty heavy split between Dameon Pierce and Nick Chubb. But when we're looking at like who's going to be the running back 1 in the second half of the season, I don't feel great about that being Nick Chubb. And so you're on a good offense, right? This team is going to put up points. Someone is going to emerge in this backfield. And so Dameon Pierce, Woody Marks, both guys who I think should be rostered heading into week 1. Because what if the Texans go out there, they're splitting 50-50 with Dameon Pierce, Nick Chubb, or like, 40-40 with Woody Marks kind of working it on passing downs. If that's the split and Dameon Pierce just goes out there and looks better, all of a sudden you're looking at like Dameon Pierce, most valuable running back for the Texans, and he's rostered in 3% of leagues. This is a guy who's flashed a little bit of something in the NFL. He's only 25 years old. He was the running back 20 in points per game as a rookie. Then you had Bobby Slowik come in. It really just kind of stalled Dameon Pierce's production, but he's still fairly young, has some juice left in the tank. I think Dameon Pierce should definitely be rostered in more than 3% of leagues. And then you have Woody Marks, who's like a round 4 rookie. The Texans clearly like him. They gave up a day 3 pick. He's rostered in just over 10% of leagues. And he is just a very strong pass catching prospect. He had at least 45 receptions in 4 of his 5 college seasons. In 2021, he caught 83 passes for 502 receiving yards as a running back. And so he's not going to come in here and be like the clear-cut RB1 workhorse, but you're kind of hoping for like in an ambiguous backfield, him to establish a really strong receiving role, kind of like a James White, Naheem Hines, J.D. McKissick type. So just on an offense that I think is going to be very good. I do think Dameon Pierce and Woody Marks like both have opportunities to emerge and be fantasy relevant. And I think either of them could emerge as early as week 1. And so they should be rostered in more leagues than they are. Then we're going to look at a rookie wide receiver here in Kyle Williams. He is rostered in 9.2% of leagues. And I just think he's a really fun, like round 3 rookie wide receiver. He's stepping into a wide open wide receiver room. Like he pretty much needs to beat out like Mac Hollins and Kayshon Boutte for like starting wide receiver snaps, assuming Diggs and Douglas are in there. Diggs obviously is locked in. Douglas, the guy getting those slot snaps. But Kyle Williams is a dangerous downfield threat. He had a 58% catch rate on 20-plus yard passes in 2024. Also caught 78% of his deep contested targets, so he can win down the field. He's also great after the catch, where on targets behind the line of scrimmage, he averaged 16.2 yak per reception. So he's a fun, explosive young player on an ascending offense, someone who definitely should be rostered in over 10% of leagues, and like truly might be a week 1 starter. If he's a week 1 starter, he just needs one big play, and all of a sudden everyone is falling in love with Kyle Williams. Then let's talk about a couple of running backs that are, pretty much free in every single league. The first one is going to be Chris Rodriguez. And I just think the week 1, like Commanders running back usage could surprise a lot of people. You have Bill Krosky-Merritt getting a lot of steam. He is shooting up draft boards. And I still think he's like a fine pick with where he's going in most spots. You have Austin Eckler moving up, but people seem to just be like completely disregarding Chris Rodriguez. And I'm not out here making the case that like he is some sort of an amazing running back who's going to come in and absolutely dominate. But we're pushing up, Bill Krosky-Merritt, who's like a round 7 pick, not exactly a slam dunk prospect. And when we just look at the week 1, like rushing betting lines, the over-unders, JCM is leading this backfield at 33.5. Then you have Christian Rodriguez at 28.5, and then Austin Eckler at 23.5. And so you're not looking at Chris Rodriguez like, 28 and a half rushing yard line and being like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I need to get him on my team. My point is more so that these guys are just super close together. It doesn't seem like there's this clear established pecking order. We've also seen that Dan Quinn has talked about like C-Rod stepping in, replacing B-Rob for like those short yardage, goal line situations. And so I can picture week one where you have Bill Krosky-Merritt, Chris Rodriguez kind of splitting those early down snaps. C-Rod's the guy getting in there near the goal line. He scores a touchdown or two, and all of a sudden people are, feeling like he's the most valuable running back in this room. At 1.8%, roster percentage, that should be a lot higher. I think he's pretty much like a free lottery ticket. And even if you're not a believer long-term, like you still think, Krosky-Merritt's going to emerge throughout the season, he is someone where you could just pick him up. If he gets into the end zone, has some decent involvement, you could just flip him, within the next few weeks. Then the other running back who is rostered in less than 2% of leagues, we have Kyle Monangai from the Bears. And I think at this point, he is the most likely week one running back 2 here behind DeAndre Swift. I did like Roschon Johnson as a sleeper, throughout the offseason, but he has gotten pretty much zero buzz. I would not be shocked if it's just Monangai, being the number 2 behind DeAndre Swift. And we know that Swift is not going to come in here and command 70, 75+% of the opportunity share. There is going to be a second running back involved here. And I think we could see Jamal Williams-esque usage out of Kyle Monangai, where Monangai is not a huge running back, neither is Jamal Williams, but you have kind of that 210-pound power back in a Ben Johnson offense. We know that can lead to a lot of touchdowns. Kyle Monangai is essentially free, and I think he's just someone who's really interesting to scoop up. You take a look at the usage in week one. If he's playing behind Roschon, all right, you're going to, have someone to pick up anyway. You could just cut him, but if he does look like the clear running back 2, getting involved near the goal line, all of a sudden you have this really interesting depth running back on your roster. Couple more players here. One quarterback, it's just Matthew Stafford. He just barely made the cut here. He's rostered in 29.4% of leagues, and he has had a lot of back concerns this offseason. He obviously hasn't been the picture of health over the last few years, but I do think he's a real sleeper to just straight up lead the NFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns. When he's on the field, he is still playing at a very, very high level. In his first year with the Rams, he threw for almost 4,900 yards, 41 passing touchdowns. He has really strong weapons with Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams coming in. If he can just stay healthy, I do think we could see him have a peak passing season. And so maybe what's the upside of picking him up right now? But if you have a weak quarterback room, maybe you're in super flex if you haven't drafted yet, I do think Matthew Stafford is just kind of a bargain here. And I do think he could be a really nice fantasy option who maybe is finishing as a back-end QB1, but he's pretty much undrafted in a decent amount of ESPN leagues. Then this next player, we got some pretty unfortunate news about yesterday. It's Jalen Coker, rostered in 5.3% of leagues. We got notification pretty much out of nowhere. Hunter Renfrow was being brought back, signed by the Panthers, and in a corresponding move, Jalen Coker was going on IR with a quad injury. This really just sucked. The Adam Thielen trade really kind of opened things up for him to slide into that slot role. He was an undrafted rookie last year who came in, really kind of made his mark, especially later on in the season. Last 7 games was averaging over 10 PPR points per game. He was 7th on the season in yards per target, 19th in yards per reception. But I still think he's worth a pickup, especially now actually. He might even, potentially should be rostered in more leagues just because you can pick him up. You can just slide him right into the IR spot. He's not going to take up a legit roster spot in your lineup. So if you've got an empty space, you can just pick up Coker, slide him into the IR spot, wait and see what he does when he gets back. But I do think he was a prime year 2 breakout candidate moving off of Thielen. I do think is a positive on how the coaching staff views Jalen Coker. And I do think he could have emerged, still could emerge as the wide receiver 2 here on this Panthers team behind Tetairoa McMillan. Now, I do think that is 10 players. I did just want to talk about a couple of other guys. They're actually teammates from the Broncos. Not saying you should go out and pick these guys up heading into week 1, but just kind of watch the usage. If we start to see some breakouts from these guys, definitely look to pick them up. The first one is going to be Pat Bryant, rostered in 3.8% of leagues. And when we look back at the 2024 Broncos, the wide receiver snaps, obviously Cortland Sutton led the wide receiver room in snaps, but number 2 and 3 were Devon Vele and Lil Jordan Humphrey. So we now have a prime opportunity with those two gone for Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin to kind of step in here and emerge. 3 young wide receivers. You know, Marvin Mims has been a super efficient option. Troy Franklin, I really liked as a prospect. Disappointed last year. Pat Bryant coming in here as a rookie. But with Vele leaving, Vele played 62% of his snaps in the slot. That is now the role where Pat Bryant could just step in, like be a week 1 starter. He was an early round 3 pick. At the time, I felt like he was a reach, but clearly the Broncos like him. They went out, they got their guy in Pat Bryant. They did the same thing late round 2 with RJ Harvey. So someone to look out for. And then also Troy Franklin. Like I said, I was a big fan of him as a prospect. I was very surprised he fell to day 3. He's only rostered in 1.3% of leagues, but apparently he's been popping in camp. He's been getting a lot of buzz. Could be someone who has a nice year 2 breakout here. So just kind of an overall message to watch this Broncos wide receiver room. They've got a lot of young pieces. We could see one or multiple of these guys start to emerge here. But that is going to wrap it up for my week 1 waiver wire targets. I do think a lot of these players are interesting, trying to kind of beat people to some of the top targets after week 1 of the NFL season. So thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.